games and gaming related technology discussions in today's episode. So we are going to skip the news today and dive right into the discussions. Adam, do you want to give us a one liner about your expectations for next year?
It's gonna be awesome.
For me, it would be short and discontinued, but we will get more into that later. So, what's your first prediction for 2021?
All right. Well, as we've seen this year, Microsoft came out with. Well, actually, I guess they came out with it a little bit earlier, but we've really seen kind of a push for game streaming. So Stadia came out. Was it this year or last year? But anyway, not too long ago. Luna definitely came out this year. XCloud's been kind of being pushed a little bit more this year, and especially because with the Xbox Series S, people were saying that's probably going to be the dedicated streaming machine, and it looks like a lot of people are kind of using it that way. So I think that game streaming is really going to be taking off this year. I think this is when we're really going to start seeing it coming through and kind of reaching its potential. Now, I don't know how popular it'll be because obviously it's still very much dependent on infrastructure and having that reliable internet. And internet's faster than it ever has been before, but unless you're living in a place that is kind of geared for it, a lot of places, specifically rural places or places in the city that are a bit older, don't have the best internet. And that's because it's either too hard to bring it out there or it's just too hard to basically tear down the old buildings and get better internet. I mean, I know that's the problem for me, where when we were living in our new apartment when we first got married, our internet was amazing. It was great. It was super convenient. You could plug, all the walls had dedicated Ethernet plugs. Moved into our new house, which was built in, I don't know, the 70s or the 80s or whatever, and it is absolutely the worst possible setup for the internet. And so I'm having all sorts of problems all the time just trying to get my internet to work, and then it doesn't work that well. So for somebody like me, I don't think it's a very good thing, and for somebody that's in a similar situation, I don't think it's a very good thing. But if you have the setup for it, I think it'll be really, really great. Also, with 5G coming out, I think 5G is going to solve a lot of those problems because it's just going to be faster and it's going to be wireless. So if we start really seeing a lot of 5G in cities and whatnot, I think that's going to kind of take over the physical cable necessity for those kind of speeds. So I do think that this is going to be, we're really going to hear a lot more about it. And specifically, what I want to talk about is because I know Xbox or Microsoft has had a fairly good relationship with Nintendo as of late. So because of that, they have, we saw with the Minecraft and that sort of thing. I think they now have Xbox Live accounts. You can access your Xbox Live account on the Switch and whatnot for certain games. So I think because of that, I think that we might see a partnership between Microsoft and Nintendo, because even Microsoft has kind of expressed in the past that this might be their last console generation as they focus more on this cloud gaming thing. And if we see, say, Stadia and Luna, they have say dedicated controllers that they can use and everything. xCloud doesn't really have that. You still have to just use your mobile and use a regular controller. So I think if Microsoft could partner with Nintendo and put, say, xCloud on the Switch, I think that would be a real game changer. And I think that would just seal them as the dominant force in the market. So I would not be surprised to see Microsoft and Nintendo working together to get xCloud on the Switch. I definitely think that there will be talks about it. I don't know if they will actually agree to it or not, but I think that there will be some things in the air talking about it and whatnot. And on a side note, I think Sony's going to keep trying with their PlayStation Now, and I think they're going to keep failing and not be as successful. They are trying to introduce more games and whatnot, but I think that it's very niche in that, for instance, I think the reason xCloud, Stadia, and or Stadia, I keep saying Stadia and Luna are why they can work is because you can really use them everywhere, and I think that's kind of the appeal. If you're playing on your console, you're just going to want to play your console. So these are more of, I'm on my phone, I'm on the couch, I can pick them up, I can play them. I'm out at the park or whatever, I can pick them up and play them. So I think that mobility is really what's going to keep them working really, really well and whatnot. You go on vacation to grandma and grandpa's house, you can still play your games. And because PlayStation Now, you basically need to have a PlayStation or you need to have the app on your PC. It doesn't have that mobility. And I think for that reason, it's just never going to take off the same way the other ones are. So that's my first prediction there. Questions on that or?
Sure. Now, PlayStation Now is an interesting case, and I think, and then you and I talked about it before. Like when it first came out, I was like, oh, cool, I get to play some older PlayStation games, and I wanted to play, what's that series with Nathan Drake?
Uncharted.
Ah, yes, I want to play Uncharted, and I'm like, but I've got so much stuff to play, and I think that's where PlayStation Now has failed. It never gave me a reason to say, hey, put down your PC games, put down your Switch games, play some PS Now PlayStation games on your PC. And I think not just that, not just PlayStation Now, but a lot of the cloud services, they're gonna have to come up with a reason to say, hey, here's a compelling reason for you to not use your PC, not use your phone, not use your iPad, not use your Switch, not use your PlayStation 5, and say, hey, play games on the cloud on whatever device you want. And the mobility reason is definitely compelling. I totally agree with that, but I think there's going to have to be more reasons moving into 2021 as to why we'd want to pay $15 or $25 or $20 a month for cloud gaming. And yeah, and infrastructure is a good point as well. Like even with my internet, I have 100 down and 40 up, but I have, Jesus, two computers, a digital assistant. I have a Wi-Fi lights and a Wi-Fi switch, and all that stuff uses my internet. And even if you do have good internet in 2021, I think a lot of people can have smart devices and smart things. And so, I mean, 5G will take care of some of that. And I have 5G in my room, but I was telling Adam yesterday I was trying to record a video for our channel, and if for some reason 5G was not working for the first time in my room. I'm like, oh no, that sucks. And the whole point of the video was 5G, so it's we'll have to see.
Yeah, so I think we'll start to. I don't think it'll overtake anything yet, but I do think we're going to see a lot more of it, and
Oh,
I think we're going
definitely.
to start seeing more of this push into that direction with this cloud gaming. Um, just because, and it's one of those things too, where, in my perspective, I mean, why would we pay extra for it? Well, we used to get TV for free, and that's gone now because cable basically overtook it, where people stopped watching free TV so they could have their du jour gaming or their du jour watching experience, and now even cable's kind of going out for streaming. But I mean, the whole point was you don't have to pay for cable, but now people pay for Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and Disney. So I mean, people are willing to pay for these four different streaming services, right? So
True.
as far as price, I definitely see people complaining about it at first, and then once I think a few people start jumping on it, and then other people see it, they want it, and then it becomes this kind of consumerist desire, and it snowballs. And I think that I think it's one of those inevitable things that, for better or worse, once you get a few people on it, everyone else is going to start wanting to jump on the bandwagon, and they're going to want it as well. So whether that will happen in this coming year, where people are really jumping on it, that I don't know. But I do think this is the year where we're going to start seeing a little more attention being drawn to it and that sort of thing. So
Definitely, definitely. I'm still hoping for more of it here in Taiwan. I just realized you've left off GeForce Now out of the cloud gaming.
I forgot about GeForce Now.
Because that is the only one, not the only one. I did see a local Taiwanese one that is being created, but GeForce Now is the only sort of international one we have available in Taiwan. And GeForce Now is still the only one you can only get if you have a particular mobile internet provider or home internet provider. That is the only way to get them in Taiwan, which kind of sucks because that particular provider is the worst provider, in my opinion, anyway.
How many games do they have on GeForce Now? I mean, is it as big as the other ones, and I'm just forgetting it, or is there a reason I'm forgetting it because
So
it's just not up to par?
the cool thing with GeForce Now is that it connects with your Steam catalog. So whatever you
Okay.
have on Steam, you can use it on GeForce Now, with the exception of some big games.
Now, are you streaming that from your own PC, or are you streaming it from their servers? As
From
long as
their
you have.
servers. From
Oh,
their
okay.
servers, yeah. So I mean that's really cool, and I love that model. The idea of being able to play my Steam games everywhere. I just wish it was available on every other mobile provider, and I'd pay money for that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. The one thing that kind of gets me is like right now. I mean, obviously our internet's getting better, but games are becoming so much more intensive simultaneously. I mean, they used to be 1080p. Now they're up to 4K, and now on PC games, certain ones are people are talking about 8K now. So I mean, as these games become more intensive, it's just going to be that much harder to stream them. So it's a question of are is the internet or the progression of our internet speeds going to keep up with the progression of gaming demand in terms of what power it requires and whatnot? Because I mean, obviously, streaming it isn't that big of a deal because you're just streaming the video. You don't have to stream any of the. I guess you don't really have to stream any of the processing anyway, but just streaming the video in and out and the controls and all that, and then also with lag, trying to minimize that. I mean, if you have some lag on say Netflix, as long as it's buffered, you're fine, right? You're not even going to ever notice it because if it buffers up the next 20 seconds and then lags for 8 and then catches back up, you're never going to notice that lag. But on a game, you need immediate response right now, and so that's going to be much more noticeable than you would ever see on something like Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus. So we'll have to wait and see.
We will. All right, moving on to my first prediction is VR, and
Ooh.
Adam's going to talk a little bit about VR as well. So
Like a
my
sentence.
VR or tech prediction in 2021 is that, people always said VR was going to overtake the world, and it hasn't quite done it, but it is slowly making its way up. I think the Quest 2 has done a big push for that. Uh, Owned by Facebook, of course. A very affordable 300 US dollars and really cool. People say it runs really well, and when you hook it up into your PC, you get a good resolution on each eye, and you get 90 megahertz refresh rate for a lot of games, which is wonderful. So you don't have that sort of motion sickness or feeling sick. I got the original Oculus, the Samsung Gear VR way back in the day to try VR out on your phone, and that thing was awesome. But man, I played Temple Run one time, and I couldn't keep it on my face for more than 1 minute because it just felt like throwing up. But I think VR is going to be more popular, going to be more pervasive in society. I think it's going to be affordable to more people be interested in it. And especially VR is doing a lot better when it comes to places with small space. They have a sitting mode and a standing mode. So if you're in Asia and if you're in like where I live, my house is not even 90 square meters. And I have a tiny living room, and I have so much stuff in my house, which is just terrible. But I get to use VR sitting down and still have the option of being immersive and having fun and that kind of stuff. And um, like I said, this was $300 when it first came out. It was on sale. I mean, you can buy it secondhand in the States, of course, for 150, 200 new on Amazon on Black Friday this past year. I think there can be more VR options, more affordable VR options. I expect an Oculus Quest 3 this year as well. Adam wanted to mention PSVR.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things that I was originally going to mention, but since you mentioned VR, I took it off of my assumptions for the year. But obviously, PlayStation or Sony has been working on the new PlayStation VR. We're not sure what it's going to be called, PlayStation VR 2 or whatever. But they are working on it, and I think they're going to announce it this year. I don't know if it'll be available this year, but I think they're going to announce it this year. So
Okay. Yeah, that's what I think VR. What do you think about VR?
I think it definitely has a lot of potential, and I think combined with haptic feedback, we're going to see a lot of really interesting things done. That said, without fully, without the Ready Player One kind of full suit where you can get the full movement in and everything, and the 3D treadmills and whatnot, I don't know how well it'll take off or when it'll really take off. I do think it's probably going to stay relatively niche. For instance, some games it's just not going to work very well. I've heard it works extremely well in Star Wars Squadrons,
Yes.
but that's a flight simulator where the character is supposed to be seated and the vehicle is moving. And I've heard in those sort of things, it feels very natural because it feels like you would be, say, in a car or something like that. Um, I've heard games like that are very natural, but I've heard games where you're trying to play, especially things like first person shooters, can be kind of really difficult to manage the aiming and the looking around and the movement at the same time. And I've heard that can be a bit jarring where you're kind of sitting around and you're using kind of a maybe an analog or something to move your character, but then at the same time you can look here but your gun's still aimed over here. And I've heard that that can be a bit jarring to be controlling movement but not with your feet, with controlling movement with your hands and and aiming with your hands, but at the same time you're looking at something. And I've heard that that can be kind of hit or miss. And action adventure games I've heard can be quite similarly difficult. If you've played, say, Wii Sports or some of the other kind of games where you're sword fighting or something like that, it works really, really well on one-on-one duels. But doing it in, say, a 3D environment with multiple enemies, if you were, say, a knight fighting, hordes of goblins or something like that, I don't know how well it will work. So I do think it's going to be relatively niche, but I do think we're definitely going to see some advancement in it, and I do think it's going to become more popular. And I think that despite the fact that it's being niche, I think we're going to see more games that are designed with VR in mind. So they're going to be designed specifically to kind of offset these pitfalls of VR, where it's like, oh, movement isn't working that great. Let's make a game where you don't have to move that much. Let's figure out a way to do that. Games like Keep Talking and Nobody Dies or something like that.
Sure.
So I think we'll see more VR ready games. Yeah.
I think this part, I mean, this is the first time we've disagreed. I actually disagree with you. I think, um, I don't think it's going to be niche, and I don't think it's going to be, fully embraced by everybody. But I think it's definitely going to do a lot better in 2021 than 2020. And I think it's because of the affordability of the headsets. I think one of the prime barriers to VR is the fact that it's just buying like a full-on VR headset. If you don't have, if you, and not to mention you need a pretty good PC, is just costs. I mean, the HTC Vive, the really nice, the best quality VR headset you can get costs almost 20,000 Taiwanese dollars, or 500, more than 500 US, I should say. And that's where the Quest comes in, is that it is, you can connect it to a PC for better performance, but it is affordable. I mean, $300 is cheaper than a nice phone. It's doable, and I think for people, and there are quite a lot of games that people would be willing to get it on. Like the biggest catches are Half-Life Alyx that you can play on the Quest without having a PC.
Yeah, no, affordability is definitely a big deal. For instance, the original PlayStation VR cost the same as the PS4. So I mean, you're basically paying double just to have this VR accessibility. So a lower price is definitely going to make it a lot more accessible to people. And I think as it's more accessible to people, yeah, you're going to see more games developed for it. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You also you made the point about the suit and the Ready Player One stuff, and I think that will bring in, finally bring it in. But even still, it'll still be something that people, like you and I were growing up, people were like, oh, computer games is not good for you. You shouldn't sit in front of a computer too long. And I think that's going to be the thing with the VR as well, in some areas and in some ways that will still prevent, it coming up to like 80% adoption.
oh yeah, no, there's definitely going to be kind of the, oh my god, it's going to be right there in your eye and whatnot. Yeah, no, I'm just speaking from my personal experience with, say, the PlayStation Move. I had the PlayStation Move, and when we got it, it was really fun, and we played it a lot. And then we didn't play it that much, and I kind of went back to more traditional kind of screen games and whatnot. And for me, it was more of the novelty of the Move, where I would use it from time to time, but I wasn't using it as often as I thought I was going to. And for me, I kind of wonder if VR might be the same thing, where if I'm playing Star Wars Squadrons, and I have the VR, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to put the VR. Oh, this is great. This is amazing. But then when I pop in, say, Horizon Zero Dawn, I think I'm going to be like, nah, take it off, set it aside. And I'd only use it for certain games that really capitalized on it. And for the games where it had it, but it wasn't that great, I think I'd probably just go to the original traditional controls. Because that's what I did with when I got Okami on the PS3. The reason I got it was because it had move capabilities. And I remembered playing on the PS2 and having to use the analog sticks to paint. And I was like, oh, I can use the PS Move and I can paint and I can do all these other things. And it was really, really great. And I played it for about 30 minutes like that. And then it was just like, oh, the painting is okay, but the rest of it's kind of really hard to do. And then I just went back to playing the entire rest of the game. I played on a basic controller and played it the same way I played it on the PS2. So I wonder if VR would be kind of like that, where there are certain things that I'd be like, oh, absolutely, I'm going to do this. Because there were games that I would play with the Move, like Sports Champions or something like that. I'd do, play some Frisbee golf and stuff like that. And that was really, really fun. But if I wasn't playing that game, I didn't usually use the Move, with the exception of maybe Just Dance. And so I kind of wonder if for me it would be like that, where I would put it on for certain games, but unless it was really designed for VR and you couldn't get the full game experience without VR, I would just opt to not use it just because it's less of a hassle and it's just easier. So that's my personal experience. So.
And I agree, and that's been echoed in media and stuff as well, is that they've got to be I was saying it's come a long way in 2020. There are a lot of compelling games, but there's got to be a reason, like you said, to say, hey, put your VR headset on today. I mean, just sort of like PlayStation now. It's like, play PlayStation now, put your VR headset on, so that people will use these things on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah, if I was playing, say, that game, Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes,
yes,
I would definitely be like, let's get the VR, because obviously we don't want other people to see the screen, and I think that would be great for that. And so I would use it for like party games and stuff like that. But then when everybody goes home and I decide I want to play some, Little Big Planet or something, back to the original screen.
Exactly. I understand. All right, let's
Although
move on.
Little Big Planet could actually probably work in VR, because it would just look like you're observing this. It'd be like looking at a little aquarium. So actually,
True.
Little Big Planet could work. So.
All right, your second prediction?
Yes. My second prediction is that Microsoft is not done buying studios at all. So they've already bought out, they bought out Rare back in the day. They bought out Ninja Theory. They've recently bought out ZeniMax with Bethesda. And they're really kind of doing this, what is being now called as inorganic growth, where instead of building something yourself from the ground up and improving on it, you're just taking work that somebody else has done and taking that and acquiring it. And then you don't have to earn it. You just kind of get it because you have enough money to buy it. And I find that really frustrating, because if we remember back to our episode about exclusivity, the one thing I hated was when a game was available on multiple systems and then it was taken away from part of the audience. And that's what we saw with Rare, because Nintendo lost a lot of the games that they had, like Perfect Dark and Banjo-Kazooie and all that. So when Microsoft acquired Rare, Nintendo lost a lot of their exclusives. Ninja Theory's probably one of their biggest games was I Am Setsuna, which was available also on the PlayStation. I Am Setsuna 2 became an Xbox exclusive because Ninja Theory was bought out by Microsoft. We've seen, and now Bethesda has been acquired by Microsoft. We just talked about in our last episode, will Returnal stay as a PlayStation exclusive, or is Microsoft going to open it up to themselves as well, because now they own Bethesda? We'll see. And of course, there's definitely been talk about the new Elder Scrolls games either being exclusive to Microsoft, or either being a timed exclusive, or maybe possibly being a timed exclusive where they come out on Xbox first and then come out on the PlayStation later. So definitely this seems to be Microsoft's MO, where they, rather than develop their own games, they just acquire other studios. I mean, that's what they did with Halo with Bungie, right? And then they owned Halo, so Bungie was out, and now it's made by, was it 343 Studios?
Yes.
So it seems that that's kind of going to be what they've been doing, and I would expect that we're probably going to be seeing a lot more of this kind of acquisition of smaller studios in the future. Now, if I don't really mind it if, say, you're the studio and you have a history. Like, for example, if Microsoft was buying exclusives or paying a certain studio to do exclusives for them, and then they said, you know what, we've been working together, let's take you under the wing. That I don't mind, but waiting until a studio has become big enough that and popular enough, and then they have a reputation, and then you snatch it away and then make all their stuff into your ecosystem and deny other ecosystems, that rubs me the wrong way. But I have a feeling that that's going to be the norm now, and I'm going to have to get used to it because I have a feeling that Microsoft is not done. And I've heard people talking about possibilities in kind of a buying war between Microsoft and Sony, where Microsoft bought Bethesda, which was huge. A lot of people were saying Sony should buy up Square Enix, which would be almost impossible because Square Enix is huge. So there's no way they could afford it. But I've heard people saying that. I've heard people saying that Microsoft should try to buy out Square Enix. And recently, Sony bought up Crunchyroll, so now they've added Crunchyroll to Funimation. So now they have that kind of anime dominance in that sense. So definitely, you can see both companies are going out of their way to acquire these smaller guys and incorporate them into their own ecosystems. So I think we're going to see more of that, for better or worse. In my opinion, it's worse, but it's good for the developers too, because it's one of those things where if you are a relatively small development company or development team, you really do rely on your game selling well in order to keep you alive. So you are kind of working hand to mouth, hand to mouth, hand to mouth. And that's kind of what we saw with Lab Zero, where they just, they were making some games and they were kind of popular, but they weren't super popular. But they also had a lot of mismanagement issues and things like that. So it's very easy for these companies to kind of collapse under, their own weight in a way. So having a big sugar daddy can really help you out and keep you. I mean, that's basically what it is, right? Can really keep you alive and can really be a boon to these companies. So I understand why they do it. I just don't personally like it. So.
Okay. I was like, you had to throw out Sugar Daddy, didn't you?
I did. Because that's how I feel.
Let me ask you, do you think Sony is at a disadvantage in the so-called buying war because they do have multiple arms in terms of entertainment, in terms of music, in terms of hardware, whereas Microsoft is a more finite company and they are, I would say, of equal size, but Microsoft is just a technology entertainment company.
I think Microsoft's actually worth quite a bit more than Sony. So I think they're at a disadvantage not because they're spreading themselves too thin, but just because I think Microsoft is one of the richest companies in the world. I mean, Amazon might be bigger, and Google might be bigger, but they're way up there. That was one of the things where they were saying if Sony had wanted to buy Bethesda, they probably couldn't have afforded it, whereas Microsoft could and easily could and still has money to spend on other things. So I do think they are at a disadvantage in that sense. However, if we're looking historically at games, Sony has done better with first-party games than Microsoft has. Now, people are saying that things have changed, but if you look at Rare, after Rare was acquired by Nintendo, they had some games that they were in development, and Microsoft was actually canceling a lot of their projects. And then when they did create something, Microsoft was kind of doing the EA thing and getting their fingers in there and telling them what they can and can't do. And that was part of the reason why they would acquire these companies. And then these companies would just kind of wither and they wouldn't actually produce any quality content because they weren't allowed to do what they want. Now, I've heard that Microsoft has kind of changed their ways under Phil Spencer. And so these companies now have a lot more freedom to do what they want. And one of the examples that I've heard is... Oh, what's that pirate game that Rare makes? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Only pirate game I know is oh my god, something Port Royal.
No, there's a pirate game and it's made by Rare.
Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves, that's the game, yeah.
Okay.
So Sea of Thieves was made by Rare, and when it first came out, it was kind of, it's definitely improved over time and gotten a lot better. It's still not a super huge game, but it's popular enough. And I've heard, because of that was one of the things where finally Microsoft kind of stood back and let Rare do what they wanted to do, and that's why the game is as successful as it is. But I've heard with previous relations, like for instance, Bungie left because they felt that they couldn't have the freedom that they wanted to with the Halo series, and so they said we want to be free and we want to do our own thing. So yeah, Microsoft kind of has a history of stifling this, whereas Sony kind of has a history of fostering it. So that's why we do see a lot more of Sony's first party exclusives doing better. Now, will that continue into the future? I don't know, because Bethesda obviously, now they have a reputation now that's not that great after Fallout 4 and then later Fallout 76, with glitchy games and whatnot. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I don't know which direction that'll go in, but I do think we're going to see more acquisitions specifically by Microsoft.
So I mean, answering our question earlier, I just looked it up. Net income as of 2020, the end of this quarter, Microsoft was 44 billion, Sony was 4.9 billion.
So yeah, literally 10 times the size.
Yeah. So that is something to take into account moving forward.
Yeah.
So my prediction for 2021, I had to do a gaming prediction, is Far Cry 6, which is a game I've loved Far Cry since the original game back in the day. Far Cry 6 is supposed to be coming out next year, middle of next year, with this guy Giancarlo Esposito. I can never remember how to say his name off.
Oh man, you can say that way better than I ever could have.
So if you've guys seen the trailer, he's standing on top of the embassy and he's a dictator and he has a grenade and he's with his son and he drops the grenade off at a bunch of protesters and he's like, yeah, I don't care. So my prediction for this game is that it's going to, when it comes out, it's going to be pretty much similar to Far Cry 5. Not too much change, not too much difference. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I'm afraid that Ubisoft is gone into the sort of churning mode. They're like, okay, Far Cry 5 did well. People like me bought Far Cry 5 and I loved it. I enjoyed it. But at the same time, I'm still sort of hoping out for some changes beyond the usual, like minor iterances in mechanics and that kind of stuff. I think it will continue to be more of the same when it comes to Far Cry 5. I hope I'm wrong, but that is my prediction, my gaming prediction for 2021.
All right. See, yeah, I'll agree. So Ubisoft doesn't usually reinvent the wheel that often. They make subtle changes and rarely for the better. But they do seem to, once they find a formula, they kind of stick with it. So I mean, we've seen that with Assassin's Creed. I mean, if you look at Valhalla compared to, say, the Ezio collection, vastly different.
True.
But going from 2 to 3, there were some minor differences, but not huge differences. 3 to 4 had some significant differences, but most of them were mostly just the naval battles. And then 4 to 5 was probably the biggest departure, but there were definitely elements of moving in that more RPG-ish route in 4 with the being more combat focused and stuff. I mean, it wasn't entirely combat focused and whatnot, but they definitely seem to do that way. And the same thing with Watch Dogs, where, what was it, Watch Dogs 2 or Watch Dogs Legion really wasn't that different than the first one. So
Yes.
you're probably right. I would probably say we won't see super big departures. Now, what would you like to see different? Because you said that you kind of would like to see changes. So what kind of changes would you like to see?
I think, all of these games I've had, like, I've said it before, so this is very hypocritical. I'm not a big story person, but I'd like to see, like, because these games don't have too much replayability, so I'd like to see some sort of replayability mechanics in the sense of The Witcher, in the sense of Dragon Age, and that, okay, if you do this decision, this is going to affect the game and change the map in a way. Because, I mean, in Far Cry 5 and Far Cry 4, you can attack bases in different ways and the way you approach a game. But once you attack a base, it's done. And that's it. It's the things you do in the game don't really matter towards the end of the game. I'd like to see, I guess that would be the biggest change, and I'd love it if they could say, okay, if you do this thing, this is going to affect the boss in the end or the final fight in the end. Or if you do this way, And I'd like to see choices, I guess. Forget about the story, actually. I'd like to see impactful choices in Far Cry 6. That would be my one and only wish list. The weapons are great, the mechanics are great, the music, the sort of vague story that they have, bad guy, kill bad guy, finish game, that's fine. But I'd like to see impactful choices in a Far Cry game.
Oh, okay. I've never played a Far Cry, so I might have to check one out sometime. Is that the one where you get the grappling hook?
That is Just Cause.
Ah, I
So,
always mix
so
those
this
two
is the
up.
one where you sort of well, basically pretty much it's just you start off weak, get cool guns, shoot people, get stronger, get more cool guns, shoot more people, kill the bad guy, finish game.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah, okay. So this is the one I've seen gameplay from, the one where you're on an island and there's
Yes.
like a punk guy,
Mm.
and then I've seen gameplay of Far Cry Primal where you're a caveman.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Okay, and then the last one was the one where you're kind of infiltrating this
The Southern
kind,
Cult.
yeah, the cult, right? Okay, and this one you're dealing with a kind of dictator, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, like a Caribbean island or Colombian kind of South American kind of dictator thing.
Exactly. So
Interesting.
we'll have to see. You're gonna talk to us about haptic feedback.
Sure. Yes. Okay. So my third prediction is that haptic feedback is going to come to the PC in a way that is significant. So I don't think it's going to come to Xbox just yet. I might be wrong. I think it will eventually come to the Xbox. I just don't know if it's going to come this generation or next generation because I don't know how well that's going to integrate given that the base controller doesn't have it. We might see it on an Xbox Elite style controller, but I think that that would kind of make things a little bit problematic because then basically what you're doing is you're saying we have the elite players who will go off and buy this fancy controller, and then you have the basic players who aren't getting this experience. So I don't know if Microsoft wants to go that direction with it, but I definitely do see PC going with it, particularly because Steam already supports it. And I know that with, like, say, PlayStation Remote Play, you do still get the haptic feedback. I did mention that Assassin's Creed did not have haptic feedback. However, recently I was noticing that I was doing the archery and the controller would lock about halfway, and then I'd have to pull it the rest of that way to fire my arrow. Now, it didn't have that, so I guess that must have been added in an update or a patch or something. The rumble feature is still just general rumble. It doesn't have the specific rumbling on the sides or anything, but it does have the little bit of the haptic feedback in the trigger there. So I'm thinking if a game like Assassin's Creed adds these sort of things, these multi-platform games, add them on the PS5, I don't see why they wouldn't add that feature to the PC version as well. So it would make sense to me just to add that in. And maybe it does. I don't know. I don't have Assassin's Creed on Steam. If maybe somebody does, let us know. If you have a DS5 and if you have Steam, the Steam version of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, let us know if they already have that. Because if they do, great. And I think that we're going to see that where we're going to have these multi-platform games that have this feature on the PlayStation. The developer's going to say, you know what, we've already kind of programmed it in. Let's just kind of, put it in over there. I know it's going to take a little bit of development because, there are things that are different between PC and PS5, but I think if they already have it, they're going to port it over to the PC. And as that happens, this haptic feedback is going to get more popular with PC games. And then we're going to start seeing PC games that are like, let's just add this in. Even if we're not making a PlayStation version, let's just put haptic feedback in the game because we can. Why not, right? And then once we do that, I think we're going to start seeing these third-party PC controllers that are going to have haptic feedback added into them. And who knows, maybe someday we'll start seeing gaming mice that have haptic feedback as well. Maybe there's going to be some kind of rumbling or, I mean, obviously with the mouse click, it's not like a full on trigger, but who knows, maybe we'll start seeing kind of a little thumb paddle on the side that has kind of haptic feedback to it or something. I don't know, but I do think we're going to see haptic feedback becoming a significant thing on the PC. That's my prediction.
And I agree with you. I mean, from what you've described, and something we'll be able to feel tomorrow, is that it
Yes.
it is pretty novel. I do have a question because I've seen this come up on our social media on the Middle Age Gaming Twitter. Is that a lot of people since the PlayStation 5's launches have been complaining about trigger breakage or trigger issues. Could you, I mean, give us, I mean, why do you think that's happening? I said it's probably because, when I was growing up, one of the rules in my house was do not hammer on the keyboard, versus my brother was just like, don't do that. And I can imagine some like really younger people or hardcore gamers who don't have that sort of rules that probably you grew up with and I grew up with, is that you take care of your stuff, be light with it, don't strangle it or suffocate it, or exert too much pressure. Do you think that's the cause, or do you think that the triggers themselves have not been tested enough in terms of survivability?
Well, back to the whole thing about us taking care of our stuff. If you talk to my mom, she would say that that was definitely not the case. But but I mean, come on, you have 7 kids, right? Uh, but yeah, it's hard to say. I could definitely see where. So when you're playing a game that doesn't use the feature, it just feels like a regular trigger that's maybe a little stiffer than usual. So in that case, I could definitely see maybe it would probably be something, and maybe it wasn't well tested or something like that. But if you're playing a game that uses the haptic feedback, I could definitely see, because it is adding resistance. And if it's at, it would be like, I could definitely see it where, like, you have a screen door and it's got the pneumatic pump on there so it doesn't slam shut. But if you still try to push the screen door shut, it's putting way too much pressure than the pneumatic pump is supposed to take, and you could definitely damage the door that way. I could definitely see if you're playing a game that does have haptic feedback and you're just slamming it every time, because it is putting that resistance, and the machine is resisting you. So I could definitely see that being an issue. Now, whether that is the person not using it properly, or whether that is just that's the nature of haptic feedback, is one of the downsides, is that, yeah, you have to put pressure on it because otherwise you can't press it, but it does have to put resistance. I could see that as being a hardware issue as well. I haven't had that problem, but I could definitely see that as being, in some cases, misuse, and in other cases, definitely being people, just the hardware itself just not being, because it's one of those things where I'm sure it's got to be very, very sensitive. And even if you do test it, you don't necessarily test it on every single controller. So just because it works on, say, 80% of them, there's still a chance that 20% might have a problem. It's similar to the Red Ring of Death that the Xbox had. Some people were having this issue, but it wasn't an issue across the board. And it's just one of those things where you can kind of plan for it, but if you don't find that when you're testing, it's really hard to verify. Because, I mean, let's say I have 1,000 testers testing 1,000 DS, or testing, say, 5 DS5s each, right? That's 5. So I have 5,000 DS5s that are being clicked, say, 100 times, right? So that is what, 5,000 times 100. That's 5 million clicks, or 500,000 clicks. Okay, so that's 500,000 clicks that I've tested, right? If you sell 500,000 PS4s and PS5s, and every single user clicks one time, you've already matched the number of times that you've tested it, right?
True.
So, I mean, there's just so much more that is being tested, that's why a lot of times, especially in these more complex games, we're seeing bugs a lot more. We go back to the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. They didn't have bugs like we do now, but that's because they were much, much simpler games. There was far less that could go wrong. And because there was far less that could go wrong, a lot of times things didn't go wrong. Now you have a 3D game like, say, Fallout. There's just so much that needs to be tested, and so much that could possibly go wrong. I mean, you need to test every single rock to make sure that it's functioning properly and whatnot. And if you hit it at just the wrong angle at just the wrong time, you're going to fall through it and fall into the sky. But the odds of that happening are super, super small, right? So once you figure out how it happened, you can replicate it, and other people can go online and they can say, oh, I'm having the same problem. But the odds of finding it while testing versus the odds of finding it later are infinitesimal. So I would say it was probably a hardware thing, but it wasn't due to a lack of testing. It was just more due to the sheer amount of people out there having this issue. I mean, I would be curious to see how many people are actually having this issue. Like, is it 10%, which would be a super significant number, or is it more like 0.5%? You know, and at which point you would say that's still a lot of people, and obviously it's a big deal, so they're going to be very, very vocal about it. And if my DS5's fine, I'm probably not going to go searching DS5 problems. You know, so if there are 5 people that have problems, they're all going to find each other pretty quickly.
Hmm.
So I would say it's probably not that big of a deal, but it probably is a hardware issue.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, since the launch, I've probably seen a mention of issues on Twitter at least once a week. And,
Okay.
and with the most recent one being yesterday. So that's why I wanted to ask, and especially since you mentioned haptic feedback, I was like, oh, maybe it'd be a good time to bring it up.
Now, when you see these, I'm kind of curious. When you see somebody mentioning it, are other people in the comments replying like, "Oh yeah, I've had that same problem," or are the comments like, "Oh man, that sucks. That's too bad."
That usually, because I mean these guys are small, like like people like us, and are not big social media personalities, but they usually is in one person. Usually one guy will be like, oh yeah, my friend has this issue, or I have this issue, but not more than that.
Okay, so yeah, I would say it's probably a relatively minor issue because obviously, because it hasn't been reported on the news yet, so it shouldn't be super significant. And I
Yes,
mean, if you're
yes,
getting a
yes.
comment that somebody has it, and I mean, if you're getting like say 100 views and only one person says that they've had the same problem, now to be fair, if you have 100 views, most of those people probably don't have PS5s anyway, right? Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, I would say it's probably more of a hardware issue than people misusing it. But I don't think it's a pervasive problem. It's probably just a very minor one that some unlucky individuals are finding. Yeah.
Unlucky.
Yeah, I have 4 DS4s because I had to get them ready for tomorrow. I've
Yes.
been pretty much using just the one, but I've used the other ones, but I haven't had any issues. Now, here's another thing though. The DS5, they released a patch for it the other day, or a few weeks ago. So maybe they haven't updated the,
The
or maybe
DS.
there was an issue there. Maybe it wasn't updated properly or something. I don't know. I really can't help you if you've had that problem because I haven't experienced it myself. So
No, no, I was just curious. I mean, that sort of brings my take into it that I mean, this is new technology,
right,
so maybe next year when however they implement it, and like I love that you mentioned mice. God, I would love that. And however they implement it, maybe that's something to take into account is that mechanical systems for the rumble, for the haptic triggers and stuff will have
yeah,
to be more tested better.
yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
what the durability on them is, and that's another thing too. Is I'm not quite sure what the lifespan of a DualSense 5 is supposed to be. I mean, all of my DS4s that I got when I got the PlayStation 4, none of those work anymore. And I was, by the end of the PS4's life cycle, I was probably into my third or fourth generation of DS4. So I had ones that I previously liked, and something would always go wrong. On one of them, the D-pad stopped working. On another one, R1 stopped working. For the most part, they would all work mostly okay, but they all would eventually have one issue that just didn't work out properly. And for the DS5, I could definitely see, because again, like I was saying with these older games, they were more basic, right? So less could go wrong. So if you were playing Sonic the Hedgehog, it usually wasn't that buggy, but you play modern games and they're a lot buggier. The same thing goes with hardware, where the older controllers were much simpler, so much less could go wrong. And so they would last. I mean, I think my parents still have the original Sega Genesis controllers that we had with the Sega Genesis, and they still work. So, um, a lot of these things, as it gets more complicated, a lot more can go wrong. So I could definitely see a
Like you
DualSense
said.
5 being a new technology having those issues. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we are running a little bit over.
3 minutes.
That's fine. We'll finish off today with shortages, which is my final prediction. And unfortunately, I should have ended off on a positive prediction, but this is the one that stuck out most to me, which is that even the end of this year, with the launch of GPUs and launch of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, that unless you're living in certain countries where these things are not in high demand, still going to see shortages of key tech products. In Taiwan, I would say the one that I know is the iPhone 12 is still in significant shortage, the 12 Pro especially. My boss is looking for one, and he's been waiting for two to already almost a month, and they don't know when they're gonna get that particular. It's some like Pacific Blue iPhone 12 Pro. Our video editor, she jumped on that early, and she got one, so she's lucky. Uh, Graphics cards
She's able to
here,
get everything.
yeah,
She's got connections.
connections, yes. And graphics cards here as well, but again, overseas in the States, in England, in Australia, in South Africa, if you're trying to buy a 3800 GTX, you're trying to buy the new AMD series graphics cards, you're gonna be pretty much out of luck. And I think moving into 2021, that's gonna be the case, as manufacturers are still catching up on all the extra orders from 2020 that are still super behind, plus new variants of COVID and slowing down production and stuff. So, as a middle-aged gamer, as a middle-aged tech buyer, that's something you have to plan for. Order stuff early if you really need something, or just wait or get something else, or just plan around the fact that still expect shortages for your new cell phones, for your new tablets and gaming tools and accessories and that kind of stuff, because I think finding new stuff, finding replacements for existing stuff is still going to be extremely difficult.
Hmm. So do you think this is going to be an early 2021 prediction, or do you think this is going to carry all the way through 2021 and we're not going to really catch up until 2022?
I think if they can get, no, I think it's going to be a 2021 issue, the whole of 2021 for sure.
So, okay. So we're going to be behind all the way up until 2022, basically.
Pretty much, and then that's if, the whole vaccine stuff, as they said, it's entirely dependent on at least a minimum of 70% of people being vaccinated, and that's 180, no, 196 countries in the world. 70% of those people being vaccinated of 7.5 billion people is a big deal. Not to mention, all the countries like Taiwan, US, Ireland, they're going to get vaccines first. Poorer African
Right.
countries are going to get last.
The politics.
Yes, so it's
I even think
it's
we're a little bit lower on the list than a lot of other countries. But I mean, to be fair, we don't have the need for it as much as some other countries do.
no,
So
but I mean the government here they've secured 15 million vaccine doses already.
15 million?
Yep,
That covers 2/3 of our population.
exactly. So I mean that's it. I mean we've got a smart president. She's planned ahead.
Oh, excellent. Lucky us.
Indeed. Oh, and that is it for my prediction. Any thoughts about shortages, Adam?
No, I completely agree here. I do think that we're going to see a lot of issues with things not being ready. I don't know if it'll carry all the way to 2022. I could definitely see that being a possibility. I think it really does depend on how quickly we can get COVID under control and get people back to work and that sort of thing, manufacturing. However, at the same time, for instance, China seems to mostly have it under control, so they'll probably opening. I think their manufacturing is already starting to open up. Taiwan, our manufacturing never even really ceased. So seeing how manufacturing starts up in the States, I think will really be one of the biggest indicators that things are coming back. So whenever they can get it under control, I think that's when we're going to start to see kind of an idea of when we're going to be able to kind of get back on top of things. And that goes into automation. Are we going to start leaning in that direction, or are we going to start trying to put people back to work? It'll be interesting to see how these factories, are they going to get to the point where they're going to say, whatever, away with it. Let's just get robots. We'll have to wait and see. So, yeah, I agree with you that there's definitely going to be shortages extending into 2021.
Okay. And with that, we're going to call today to a close. Please follow us on social media. Hit the like button, hit that bell button, because that also helps. Those thumbs up on YouTube videos also help boost the visibility of our content. Please keep an eye out for after the show tonight, Taiwanese time, or in the morning, Tuesday morning, American time. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions, whatever you want to think. Please follow us when we stream. I'll be trying to stream. Well, I won't be streaming that much because I'll be doing a bit of family gaming and video calls this week. But I will be streaming as usual Mondays, Thursdays, Fridays, starting next week again in 2021. And Adam, what are we doing tomorrow?
Tomorrow we're going to be doing our, I don't know what you call it, a multi-stream, a co-stream. We're going to be streaming together. So Korean's going to be coming over. So is Bella, and my wife has strangely decided that she wants to join in as well. So she's going to be gaming with us as well. So we're going to be streaming on Twitch because unfortunately trying to get my internet to do the multi-streaming thing is hard. And the PlayStation 5 can natively stream to either Twitch or YouTube. So we should be on Twitch. So check us out there if you come along. And yeah, drop us a line. Let us know what you think. Please come and watch. Tell me why I'm wrong about VR and why Korean is correct. And this is going to be the last show of 2020. We have some big plans for 2021. So we'll do a video about what we're going to be doing in the future. So keep an eye out for that. And similar to Korean, you guys will see us streaming as a group tomorrow. But then I will be away for the New Year's. So I will not be streaming this Friday. But starting next week, should be back to my Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, hopefully. So look forward to that and see you guys soon.
See you.